Hey everyone, this is Ryan with Ryaninos Creative, and today we have an exciting case study with writer and director Noah Castro. Noah and I collaborated on his short film Migration over the course of the last few years. Ryaninos Creative led the post-production phase through key storytelling VFX and the design of set extension elements. And we also work with Noah to create a theatrical one-sheet, or as most people would know, a poster for the film to help promote it on social media channels and in print. If you have any potential design, VFX, or social media content needs, click the link below to schedule a free brand audit with me. For now, we're going to take a deeper dive into our collaboration together on Noah's film Migration. So Noah, could you please tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a writer-director. Probably have a lot more behind my belt in writing than directing. Actually, the project that we collaborated on was my first independent film as a director. I've done a lot of co-writing, co-directing kind of things in the past. Mostly things that I've done for here in Hollywood anyway have been kind of like ghostwriting for hire, screenwriter for hire type of jobs. I was trained formally at the London Film School, and then came out to Hollywood in 2013. And just kind of worked my way around the block. You know, a lot of what I do is people have hired me on to kind of fix up scripts that weren't really at the top shape, and I stepped in and did a lot of story doctoring, things like that, some rewrites, and kind of all different levels of the ecosystem here in Hollywood. And then I had some of my own scripts that were just kind of in the slush piles and not really advancing. So one of the things I was coming up against was, well, this is a good script, but there's not much about you. Like, who are you, and what's the advantage for us to be moving forward with a project that has you attached to it? And it was kind of like, okay, well, you know, I felt myself being the weakest link in the collaboration. Oftentimes, if I had to, you know, I work with a director or producers that are well established, and then I just felt I was kind of the one that was holding things back. So I wanted to get something out there that represents me a little bit more and can have an impact on an audience, and also a bit of, you know, calling card. Like, that's what a lot of short films are for, as well as one of the scripts that I have that I felt this short film could be like a proof of concept type of thing. And so it's a sci-fi genre twist. Speaking about the project that we collaborated on together, which is also where I come from, I really like stories that really tap into the depth of character and have a lot of relevance for larger, you know, political things, cultural things that are happening that affect us in very deep ways, contemporary things. But then I also, you know, I'm very aware that if you want to get attention for something, if you want something, especially in Hollywood, to get noticed, then there has to come with some kind of a commercial appeal. So, you know, finding ways to meld the two things together is an interesting challenge. So, you know, this project that we worked on together, Migration, it's the universal story of people moving around the world to either escape peril or seek better opportunities for themselves. And it takes that and gives a little bit of a genre twist in the sci-fi direction. It's about a young migrant who's trying to apply for a work program, and she has to go through a rigorous screening process. Then, through the course of the film, you realize that this work program she's trying to apply for, which puts her through this really inhumane screening process, is for getting a job and placement on a colony on Mars. And then Ryan, you came on board in the post-production process, where we really needed to get that, you know, the digital aesthetic to fit with what we had already shot in our principal photography, and really sell a lot of that expansive sci-fi part of the story. It's also my first time getting that into visual special effects and all the different layers involved in that whole process. It's an exciting process of discovery, where oftentimes, when even as a writer, they say that there's three versions of the script. You know, there's the written script, then there's what you shoot, and then there's the edit, right? And the story changes. Well, but then there's also the other aspects of post, especially if there's a lot of digital effects. Then it creates a whole other fourth dimension. Really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, I mean, even with a little bit of post experience myself going into this, it was a bit of a new set of challenges for me. And like you said, there was you kind of know going in, or you know, like reading your treatment and your your concepts and the references that you had pulled before I came on. I had a little bit of an idea like what we were going to make, but actually getting into rendering and building it out, and just there's just always elements that you can't like perfectly predict. So it was probably my biggest challenge in a project to date, but also on the other side of it, like really satisfying just to try to see it through with you. And it was also just a crazy time in the world. Everybody was basically segregated, isolated, because we worked on this for on and off, I want to say 2.5, 3 years. So it was, that was like a challenge too, is just like learning how to work collaboratively, but like literally like 100 miles apart. And then some members of our team, you know, in different countries and different time zones and all that. So there was like a ton of moving
we started
parts.
right after, like I did my principal photography, and then COVID happened 2 weeks after my principal photography. And then I think we went into post, it was about a year maybe into COVID, but it was still like relevant.
Yeah, it was still fresh. I mean, I'm still personally a little bit like in an adjustment to post-COVID. I think we all are to some degree. But well, that kind of answered what I was going to ask you. But like, how was that? Like, how was that process to work with me and the rest of the team that we formed? Like, how was the experience on your end?
Well, I think, you know, if I was going to sum it up with one word to start with, I would say like educational. You know, it was quite far afield from the prior experience that I have had with especially with writing, but also just with filmmaking in general. Even though I've done quite a bit of work on production in films and television and other, I think a lot of it is so abstract. It's, you know, especially when you're collaborating with other creatives, right? You want to be able to visualize the same end goal or end product as best you can, and that requires a lot of good communication. It requires a lot of synergy and the tools to be able to express those things, which I probably didn't have so much of in the beginning. And so I think I learned a lot through your guidance, because I mean you really did kind of guide the ship. You know, you were spearheading pretty much all of the would you say like exploration into how we were going to manifest these ideas visually. And it's, you know, it's pretty hard for you, I would say, because you're relying on what my imagination is telling me and the limitations I have to communicate that in a language that you can apply, right? And so I think finding that that medium, educating me on the way to communicate the things that I was looking for, was very educational for me, obviously, and also hugely rewarding in the sense that I have a different way I can understand describing, you know, digital aesthetic, or the process from going, you know, from zero to having a completely visualized digital space manifest that fits what my imagination is. So I think that was awesome. And you know, it takes its time, it takes its dedication, and in a lot of ways it's also, you got to recognize there's a challenge on both sides, because sometimes I know exactly, as the, you know, director or the person who has the imagination, that's had the vision of this for quite a while, sometimes you know exactly what you want to achieve, and then that has to be executed by people who don't have that imagination. They just need to do it through communication. And then sometimes you have no idea, you just know the impact that you want it to have. And so then there's more of a blank page that has to fit, you know. So I'd say those are like the two really the biggest challenges in trying to collaborate in that space without having prior experience doing so. And I think you made that very manageable.
I mean, yeah, it was kind of maybe a little bit of yin to your yang, if I'm not being too like analogous or something. But I had, you know, coming from like an advertising background with most of my work, I'm kind of used to being more on the rails and everything being I mean, like it's just a different expression. I mean, there's a lot less expression in that to some degree, and it was actually really fun and freeing in a lot of ways to like work with like another artist and somebody that's in a different medium, that's a writer and a director. There was like a whole host of challenges for me on that end. Like ultimately, it made me realize like I enjoy being, because like you said, like I'm not a writer, but I really love to, like I kind of in this project that we did, I felt like a vessel for you, or like a conjurer, of like trying to bring what you're doing to life. But I'm not in your head, so it's like there's a bit of like a, I guess, a lost in translation or like a separation there too. But it was like a beautiful sort of dance that I hadn't been exposed to before, doing mostly advertising work. So I definitely love the experience. And I did also have to kind of learn, again, like same but opposite, I think, to you, like how to speak to what you were talking about and interpret it in the same way. It sounds like you had to kind of ascertain what the heck I was talking about, like the design and all the technical stuff that we were in the weeds on for like months on end, and rendering challenges and everything. So it was definitely an education on my side as well, but just, pretty thoroughly fulfilling at the end of it, at least. I guess from that, like with what we created, or at least on the visual side, like what kind of impact did what we were able to deliver, like me and the rest of the team, like have on the film for you? Like, did it hit the mark for you, or how did you feel about it when we shipped the final?
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's two sides of it, right? Because on the one hand, we always knew going into it that what we were trying to achieve with the visuals is basically selling the genre twist for the film, because it starts out feeling like it's a drama about, an immigration story about this young migrant. It's a contemporary story going into a migration compound to do a screening for a work placement. And it's not until we get to those, she goes into like a screening, and then she passes the screening, and then they admit her into doing a simulation, which she then has to pass in order to be able to advance in the system for the process. And that simulation is a simulation of space travel. And so this is where the CGI and a lot of the visual effects elements come into play. And that always had to sell the genre twist. So that's where it's revealed that this is not just your run-of-the-mill contemporary immigration story. There's a much broader universe, that represents a wider scope for the story. And it's going to take us all the way to Mars. And so, in that sense, we had a lot of working on the blank page and trying to figure out how to sell that concept. And so I was really pleased with how that worked out. And there was a lot of license to kind of take that in all these different directions, but it's kind of the double-edged sword, right? Because once you start going out into space and exploring how far you can take something, then you're also giving yourself more work. So,
True.
but I think,
Yeah.
that was part of how we had to kind of balance that to get the expansive scope of what the potential is for the film, but then also make sure we don't get too far afield of what the underlying dramatic journey is for the character, which is more based in that it's an indictment on humanity, because there's a immigration agent that's doing the screening interview with this migrant, and they're both young women. They should be at the same point in their life, but they're really at opposite ends of the socioeconomic spectrum in a more dystopian, extreme kind of global space, which is probably where we're headed in the near future. And so not getting too far afield from that, but still being able to visualize the broader scope of the concept. I think we achieved that pretty well. And then I started off by saying, there was two things that we were trying to do, because just being honest about my own shortcomings, maybe not shortcomings, maybe that's kind of harsh on myself, but we did shoot principal photography, and then we had COVID. And so when we went to do our reshoots, in between reshoots and principal photography, and having a limited budget for doing a short film, we had to clean up a lot of stuff too. So there was stuff that would have been easier probably in our post-production process if I had more experience maybe going into it from the beginning, and just probably better planning for the actual principal photography. But that was a lot of roto work that we ended up having to do, and in some ways we were limited with what we could achieve based on what shots we had to work with, right? So I think just being maybe honest and the constructive criticism would be of myself, it would have been advantageous for me to get you involved earlier in the process. Because I think if I was going to do it again, conceptually, you'd want to have, your full post-production team, especially when you've got such abstract visual effects coming into play. You want to have that probably from the outset of production so that you have on the front end of things a plan for what you're going to do on the back end of things. And I think when I engaged you in the process, we were already kind of in the middle and we couldn't go back and get different shots. So we were kind of just working with what material we had at that time, which it gave us maybe a little bit of a framework. So, we weren't necessarily dealing with completely starting from zero and having totally blank pages to fill in. But at the same time, we had to, there were some things that we had to clean up or some shots that probably, if we had slightly different angle or slightly different, mapping worked out from the beginning of the process before we even went into photography, probably would have benefited the process a lot more. But it's a live and learn type of thing, and next time I'll get you involved from the beginning.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I think you're being pretty harsh, or there's definitely you're being fairly heavy or judgmental on yourself. I think it's inherent. It sounds like with independent films. I mean, this was my first indie film myself, or short film, and just as far as VFX and design goes, like in post specifically, you're always kind of at the end of the pipeline. So there's usually any number of different like challenges or things that, me or other members of the team, I'm sure wish we had a little bit more like see around the curve or like you said, involved maybe a little earlier. But that's kind of part of what comes with the territory of VFX, I'd say. Being proactive, even though you have to be reactive, like you're not getting necessarily the full picture up front, and then things change. It tends to take a while to fully fulfill the VFX on something like this, again, especially with the remote kind of isolated nature of the world at the time. So all of that kind of put like a fog or like a bit of a, it just created a little bit more challenges than I think would conventionally be there. But at the end of the day, for me, I feel like the whole thing sharpened me. It's all those challenges, like a lot of them for me, I feel like I didn't hit the mark or rendering took longer. There were a lot of technical things that like made my head explode, and then I had to like pack it back together and like still come up with a solution. And I think that's kind of what filmmaking is, right? Is like working with whatever limitations come your way and still telling a story that's effective.
Well, on that note too, I mean, you were wearing several different hats at the same time, right? Just because of the size and scope of the project. And so, if you have a more streamlined process and you have more of a budget that you can have a full team, then you can have more narrow focus and zero in on, certain specific things that you're doing, but you're kind of going all over the place. Because you were also, you were doing the rendering, you're doing the designing, you're doing you're even doing some compositing because we were only working with one compositor, and then you were managing the overall design of everything. Probably several different jobs that you're doing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning it was more of just set extension, or not set extension, but like I guess you would say like digital props or things that would kind of paint the picture of this world that you've created more in the sci-fi direction from what was on plate or what was in camera, which was fun because I mean, I really, again, my background was more graphic designer first and vector logo design and then animation. And by the time I met up with you, I'd got into 3D and compositing a bit, but I had to like pull every like creative knife out of the drawer in my arsenal to like get it done. And I also had to frankly like learn how to communicate better and like listen to people and not at times not let my own maybe ego or just the fun of getting to be a vessel for a writer, like at times was blinding. Like I just would go off in a direction and want to just create just for the fun of creating. And it's like, at the end of the day, we've still got to ship this by a certain time and we've got to tell your story. So it was a lot of lessons that were, I guess, like soft skill lessons too, as much as technical for me. And like for that, I'm like grateful, because if I didn't, had I like if this project never came across my desk or my computer, I just wouldn't be as developed as like even as a person, as heavy as that might, or as like dramatic as that might sound. So it kind of allowed me to kind of view myself from out here and go like, hey, like it's fun to sit here and design this, but let's reel it back in, and like what's most important for migration and for Noah's story. And with all the limitations we had going on, to still do all that was like, initially it was really, really hard for me. So yeah, it
Sure.
was a good experience on that end.
Well, you can boil it down too from, macrocosm to the microcosm. What are we achieving with this investment of time and energy that we're putting in? Things like that maybe where I was talking about before, where it's like, you can take it as far as you want in the imaginative space and say, like, the star maps, for example, where we never quite, finished off the star maps. They're there, but we could have taken that to another level. But then, looking at it in the full context of the film, and if people are going to see that for, zero point 0.5 seconds, and then, on to the next shot, and the next shot, and then what's the thing that we want to resonate most with the audience, you get, law of diminishing returns on some of the time you put into it, right? And like I say, if it was the kind of thing where you have a team where somebody can just focus on that one thing, and it gives you that slightly more genuine, slightly more compelling, three-dimensional sci-fi spaceship simulation feel, it's worth going that extra mile just for that one little extra benefit. But I think with, just with the situation that we had, where you have to triage a lot of things, and maybe you don't get that to the full 100% impact that you want, and you get 80% the way there, but you can still tell the story.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think. There was so much too. I mean, even doing the poster toward the end, and like coming up with that was a lot of fun. I mean, we really didn't have a lot to go on, and that was really, I mean, I had your direction, and ultimately I think we were thinking about reshooting a photo of the headline actress, and we were able to just extract an existing frame of the film, and kind of do some kind of like matte painting and paint over a little bit of CGI. It's kind of interesting, because in a way, that's almost my favorite part of the project, because, a good poster or a good key art is, it taps into, like, if there's a twist, and in your movie there certainly is, as you've like
Right.
alluded to and painted, we got to play with the duality of like kind of the obvious, the theme of migration and like, I guess earthly or more contemporary issues or realities, but then kind of hint at something that was in the stars, or that was more, I guess, interstellar, without like fully tipping it off in the key art. That was a challenge, and also just like really thrilling at the end to like look back at it, for me at least, like, because I feel like it has a little bit of that duality to it, just like your story. Yeah.
No, and that's another place where I think you have a lot of experience. For me, I don't do print and advertisement things, and I'm not a good self-marketer. Like self-promotion is not something that comes naturally to me. There's something about it that just doesn't. I'm a more humble, probably by nature. I'm more soft-spoken or more humble. The self-promotion thing is something that probably is more of a challenge for me. So. Definitely helps someone else have a different perspective, especially where like you pretty much knew what to do with that, where I was again like going back to starting from scratch, like, well, not really sure the best way to achieve these things. But I think that was probably something that you found easier than other things that we had done. At least that's what it seemed like for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, without prattling on too much about my background, like my first kind of entrance into design was doing theatrical banner ads and banner campaigns, or I guess they're still around, but 10 or 15 years ago, that was like the bread and butter of before social media, and as we know it now, and Instagram and, well, TikTok, which we'll see if that gets to stick around or not. Before social media was at its current place, what I had a ton of experience doing was taking existing key art, not designing it, taking stuff from all the big movie producers or film studios, I should say, and we would get that from them. And the key art, what am I trying to say? Theatrical one sheet, I guess, is like the nerdy official way to say it. But getting that, and then we would have to repurpose it in all these different, basically squares and rectangles, and still make it legible. So I had like a dimension of experience with it for many years. And then I have like fundamental design skills, but it was a challenge to like, and very fulfilling to like have your story and everything you were trying to portray. And then we didn't have any real assets, and we didn't have camera time with the lead actress or anything like that. So it was really like a riddle or a puzzle of what do we have, kind of like the whole film in some ways, like with limited things, how do we still tell this story? And with a poster, you know, there's no animation or anything like that. So yeah, it was definitely more in my wheelhouse from doing a ton of advertising work, but yeah, also a challenge too. But it might have been my favorite thing, actually, in a way. Just to try to convey everything in like one frozen image.
And good typeface. It's a good typeface.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I came across that font. I think I already had it, because designers, like, we kind of like stockpile them like the end of the world's coming. So, but it felt right. Yeah, and I think it worked out okay in the end. Well, I don't want to cut this short, but more broadly, like for anybody that's thinking about working with me or with the Ryan Enos creative team, that's like on the fence, even about just booking a free call and just, you know, having a conversation with me about their brand or their projects, like, what would you tell them? What would you have to say to them?
Well, I think I would say that compared to most people I collaborated with on this project, you're definitely at the top end of being most approachable. And I don't know, you kind of knock yourself for communication, but I think you communicate very well. And I think, you know, there isn't a lot of the time when you're dealing with creative people, the biggest thing you have to get through is just the ego, you know, making sure you can work with somebody because your egos are not going to clash or your personalities are not going to clash. And I find you're a very agreeable person, and your style of communication is very much in service to the product or the project, and you're very honest, which helps a lot. Because a lot of times you get involved with people in a creative capacity and you just have to find a way of interpreting the ego. A lot of people will say they're capable of something that they're not, or they can do something faster than they really can, or if they can't do something, they try to convince you that the way that they do it looks better than what you're asking of them. You know, those are all like real world examples that I think anybody trying to get involved in a creative collaboration or looking for somebody to contract and do work and giving them some kind of digital aesthetic is gonna have to vet that potential collaborator on how well they can work together and get past those kind of personality or ego issues. You don't really have that, that problem. I think you're pretty much, you wear your emotions and your feelings on your sleeve, and what you see is what you get, and you communicate very well. If something is going to be easy, if something's going to be a challenge, what kind of parameters you would need in order to feel comfortable. I think those are all really invaluable assets, and for anybody who's looking to collaborate in the creative space, that's a godsend, right? So that's the first thing I would say. And then, secondly, solid professional, very dedicated, and you obviously have a wealth of knowledge and experience that are also very time-proven assets for you. I think it's a no-brainer.
Well, thanks for saying that. I feel like I'm like fishing for compliments asking for this, but it's not, I don't really like doing promotion honestly either, but yeah, I mean,
well, for me, I would definitely go, I would double down, triple down on not having to deal with ego conflict is such a huge thing. It's like I've dealt with, not just obviously with the visual effects, but with all of the different aspects of making a film. Not just with this project, as a writer myself, being on the other side of it and being contracted to do something, like I say, somebody wants me to come on as a ghostwriter, or somebody wants me to come on as a technical consultant, do some story editing, story doctoring. Ego is always something that you have to navigate your way through, because you have to figure out, are we talking about a technical thing right now, like what is technically the right idea or the better choice, or are we talking about my idea versus your idea, or are we talking about, I just don't like the way that was phrased and I need you to rephrase it so that it makes me feel better about myself, and the best thing about our collaboration is I don't feel we had to deal with those issues at all.
Same. Yeah, no, I mean, it is rare in the entertainment space, frankly, to not have to kind of mince words or kind of work around people's egos and everything to get a project done. And I definitely felt like that was a two-way street, like a lot of honesty and straightforwardness. And, I didn't know you at all before this. We were recommended, I think, to each other by a mutual friend, Erica. So it was kind of, I guess you'd say a creative gamble, or like, anytime you're bringing new people together, you don't really know how they're going to mesh, much less like you never know how the project's ultimately going to go. But no, I mean, I reflect the same to you. Like, you were very like transparent, and I've definitely worked with higher ups or clients that either aren't as transparent, or yeah, you've got to kind of like decode what they're saying, or you've just straight up got to like deal with a wild ego. And yeah, those are like extra challenges that we're not compensated for, and they get in the way of like doing our best work. So yeah, it was definitely like a pleasure on my side as well to get to work with you.
Likewise.
Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time today, Noah, to talk with me and kind of break down our work on migration together. I'm sure we'll do more work together, but yeah, just thanks for jumping on today. And
Absolutely, man, my pleasure.
I think that's gonna do it for this case study today. If you have design or social media VFX needs, don't hesitate to book a free brand audit with me at the link below. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.